1. A little backstory. I used to live in a moderately safe neighborhood. We had the occasional burglaries, but nothing out of the ordinary. At the time, I was 17 years old, and my boyfriend and his friends decided to call me in the middle of the fucking night while I was with my friend Stacy for a sleepover. My boyfriend told us that they were nearby 7-Eleven and wanted to meet us. Bear in mind, it was around 10 p.m. We were pretty reluctant. They convinced us by offering free food. Yes, I know, but we were teenagers. So we decided to meet them. Stacy's parents were away for the weekend, so it wasn't a problem for us to go out. We got to the 7-Eleven by 10:30 p.m. and got food and sat around outside. It was getting quite late, and if I can remember properly, it was around 1:30 a.m. when I decided that it was time to go back. Stacy was pretty trashed, and I had a couple of drinks myself. So naturally, we said we couldn't drive home. In retrospect, I feel extremely stupid for ever going out that night, but we were only a couple of blocks home, so we decided that we would walk back. We were just past the corner we turn on to go to Stacy's house, and all of a sudden, we hear a loud, "Hey girls!" We both quickly turned around and saw probably a middle-aged man, around 6 foot, walking towards us. It was 1:45 in the morning, and this guy was wearing a grey shirt and some shorts. I came to the realization that this was not normal, and that we should probably walk faster and ignore this guy. In the shock, we had both sobered up and had come to our senses, so we started to walk faster. By the time we were around 4 houses down from home, Stacy turned around to see that the guy was following us quite quickly. He was saying stuff like, "Hey girls, come here," and "You girls sure run fast. You girls stayed at 7-Eleven for a very long time." By now I was freaking out because he must have followed us back from 7-Eleven, and we didn't even notice. He was now running pretty fast, and it was dark, so all we could hear were quick footsteps on the sidewalks. I didn't want him to know where we were staying, so we rushed behind one of the houses and waited. Yes, it was really dumb, but we had no other choice. We thought it had worked because he had stopped following us and had walked back round the corner. We waited another 10 minutes just to be sure and ran back home. As soon as we got in, we double-locked the door, turned all the lights off, and rushed upstairs. Stacy's house had a pretty secure backyard with high fences and a padlocked gate, so we felt safe. We both were petrified, so naturally, we didn't want to fall asleep. I called my boyfriend and explained what had happened, and he said that it was just some druggie. Nevertheless, I broke up with him a week after the incident. Around half an hour later, we heard a large bang coming from inside the house. At that moment, Stacy and I were about to go to sleep when we heard it. I grabbed the nearest thing to me, which so happened to be a fucking dildo. Dear God, we teenagers were dumb. So I opened the door a little bit to see nothing in the corridor, so we assumed it must have been the wind or something. Don't judge, we were still pretty out of it and exhausted. Just as we were about to close the door, we heard the back door slide open. This person was actually in our house now, and Stacy started crying. Adrenaline pumped through me as I ran down the hallway and threw the dildo down the stairs. We heard it drop to the bottom with a thud and shuffling, and then the back door slide open and closed again. I was absolutely screaming my head off now, yelling, "Get the fuck out of our house! We will call the police!" After about 15 minutes of silence, we decided to head downstairs quietly and check what happened. Apparently someone broke the glass in the kitchen by throwing a rock through it. And that was the bang we heard, and unlocked the slide door. We knew that this person was still out there, so we decided to call the cops. They came around 20 minutes later and called it a forced entry and burglary. Stacy's parents came home early after we told them what happened, and they got extra locks for every door in the house. I still get quite cautious whenever I come back from any store past 8:30 p.m. Stacy was very reluctant to leave the house at night after that, and after high school, we lost contact. 2. To give you a little background information, I was 13 when this happened, around 5'1" and 95 pounds, and the usual European-looking girl, blue eyes, light skin, light hair, so not very intimidating at all. My friend who was with me is this heavily set, ethnic-looking friend. He was 15 at the time. My friend and I had just finished shopping for our Halloween costumes, and we were sitting outside this mall at around 6 p.m.-ish. So it was still light out, but kind of hard for me to make out details of objects. We were sitting on the trolley rail within 5 meters from the kiss and ride his father was going to pick us up from. We were chatting and basically just screwing around with Snapchat filters and sending videos of ourselves to friends. This area in Australia is very well known in my state for boggins and druggies. I see this man walking from person to person, looking very homeless. I have some pity for him, and I nudge my friend, let's just call him Henry, directing his attention towards the homeless man. He goes rigid and keeps his eyes trained on the guy at all times, obviously a bit intimidated. Of course, he comes up to us and I give him a long look over. He's this 5'8" man, dark skin, sores, and scabs all along his face. His clothing is all ratty and caked in dirt. He reeks like death and obvious drugs. His eyes are very bloodshot, and I'm thinking he's either on drugs, alcohol, or maybe both. And he's got an empty vodka bottle with a disgusting smelling liquid, similar to the leftovers from homemade drugs. "Got any change?" he asked me. His eyes obviously drawn to my body, and I feel disgusted, as I have a very childish body and I don't look very old, with this 40-something man staring at me like a piece of meat. I'm too scared to even answer, so I simply shake my head. He sneers at me and looks at my friend, asking the same question. Henry, being the dumbass he is, opens his wallet to check, flashing his bright yellow $50 note, and the druggie notices it and reaches out. Henry, realizing what he's just done, quickly closes his wallet, saying, Sorry mate, I don't have any." He glares at me. I don't even know why. I wasn't the one with $50 bloody bucks. And bares his disgusting teeth, all blackish yellow, and his breath reeks of vodka and something similar to rotting meat. He then steps forward, so we're almost chest to chest, and looks down at me. Henry is too shocked to do anything, and I can't step backwards as my back is pressed against the trolley return bar. My adrenaline kicks in, and I assume an offense position. Fists obviously raised, and I glare back at him, attempting to intimidate him. This didn't work. He eventually steps backwards and walks off. Not before calling us a couple of names. Henry, of course, does the stupidest thing he could do then, and calls out, "Oi, I said I was sorry, bro." This causes the guy to turn around and stalk over to us. He gets right and close, making sure we can't move away without bumping into him. He gets right up into Henry's face and says, "Fuck off, you bloody wog." Henry, as I said, belongs to ethnic culture. He's something like Greek, Italian, Irish. So the word wog pisses him off very much. He gets obviously ticked off and stands up and gets right into this guy, his shoulder pressed into his chest. Henry's a good 6'1", 6'2", so he easily towered over this guy, basically breathing into his face. The druggie backs off and runs towards the bus station across the road, asking the people under the shelter for their money. I completely lose it at this point, shaking and talking incoherently, whilst Henry calls his dad and tells him to hurry the fuck up. Cat is in trouble. His dad arrives shortly and yells at us to get in the car. Henry's dad is a total asshole. and didn't care that some guy just scared the living hell out of us. He promptly drives me home, yelling at Henry the whole time. He pulls into my street, and I get out and sprint home. I'm scared of being outside. I run inside, and my dad sees that I'm obviously shaken up, calls the police, and tries to get the appearance of the druggo out of me, whilst I'm having a mini panic attack. The police here are very helpful, and send a car to the mall to check for the guy, coming up with nothing. The people who they sent were absolutely lovely, and kept monitoring that place for a good month or two. I'd like to say it ends here, but sadly it does not. That same year I got a job at a small store in that very same mall. I hadn't seen this druggie for a good few months, and the police never came up with anything, so completely forgot about it. At my work we got pretty festive during Christmas, with Santa hats and reindeer antlers, so we obviously did the same thing during Easter. I had myself a cute little pair of ears and a cotton tail to go with it. On the registers we joked around a lot, and were always having conversations with our frequent customers. I was in a very good mood, as I had such a lovely conversation with the lady, and we were all laughing at her jokes. I called for the next customer to come over to me, and start scanning a few items before I hear this guy start talking to me. "Cute ears. A girl like you shouldn't be dressing so adorably, with such horrible boys working with you. The boys I work with are absolutely lovely, and they never made a comment about my bunny get-up." I look up and freeze. The same druggy guy from before is there, and I try to keep my cool. I start silently crying and continue serving him, before he makes a disgusting comment about me having to dress up sometime for him in his home. I knew what he was getting at, and I was horrified he'd say that to an underage girl. The boy on the register next to me hears and stalks over to my register, standing directly beside me, just staring the druggie down. This druggie obviously looks ticked off and says, "Oi mate, I'm just talking to this lovely girl." He reads my name tag. I have my nickname on it, and says, "Kat and I are having such a nice conversation, aren't we?" I choke out a yes in reply, and my friend sees I'm visibly scared. He basically moves me out of the way and finished the transaction for me, before telling my duty manager to make sure that the guy can't come back in. I've worked at that store since, and I've only ever seen the guy once more. And the same boy pushed me into the small room that the money machines were in, and told me to stay put until the druggie left the store. The managers were pretty ticked off that I wasn't working for a good 15 minutes, but the boy informed them of what happened with me and the creep. So, Mr. Creepy Druggo, who assaulted me and made lewd comments, I hope I never have to see your goddamn face again. 3. Hello. Okay, so I'm not really a storyteller, but I have a lot of stories to tell, so bear with me. This one in particular I'll call the door story. Edit, I'm a chick. So it started off, playing an MMO that I've been playing for the last 6 years. I'd moved over to a different server with a couple of friends with big dreams to start a new guild, etc. Soon after it failed, of fucking course, and I found a home with some nice people who needed my class. All was well. Then I heard some rumors of a returning player who had also played my class, and he was apparently exceptional, etc. So naturally, I got very excited. Finally, some competition. Finally, he returned to the game. I was quite disheartened that his skill was not as high as I was expecting. He had poor choice of the spec he was playing, and it was just very disappointing. I tried my best to help him get a bit better, as he took feedback quite well, but he was always mechanically heavy as a player and never really took to min-maxing, which was fine. But I still tried to bounce some ideas off him anyway, because it's not like I had anyone else who played my class as much at the time. Anyway, getting a bit off topic, but yeah. So we were friendly, I guess. He was always a bit blunt, mature, and wasn't really that funny, but I got the idea he was a bit older, so all made sense. Edit, he was like 42. So time passes and we all become pretty good mates in this guild. A heap of us lived in the same city, and would sometimes go out for dinner or for drinks and stuff. Turns out, there was also a crew in another city that did the same thing. So we had the idea of merging and hanging out for a weekend together. Through many driving hours and much planning, we finally ended up in their city, ready for the weekend. Stayed at the parents' house of one of our guildies, cause their parents were on a trip overseas at the time. Pretty large place. The first night we had organised a big dinner with everyone, including people that weren't staying with us. I sat down, do a bit of hello wave around as a bit of lame greeting cause I'm socially retarded, and instantly noticed someone sitting opposite me, staring at me in an extremely intense way. I say hello, trying to help ease the situation, thinking maybe he doesn't get out much. He then says who he is, and I realise he's the other player that plays my class. I had someone on the other side of me who was pretty chatty, but I was seated right at the end of the table, so there wasn't much to easily distract me. We started ordering food. He asks me like 12 times what I'm getting. I say I don't know yet. I decide, and he instantly also chooses what I'm getting. I try not to let it bother me and keep talking to everyone else. Mingle a bit, but we obviously talk a lot about the game we all play, which is a great icebreaker. So towards the end of the first night, we're all kinda ready to pass out, pretty late in the evening. I was trying my hardest not to look tired cause this guy still hadn't left yet. Just sat there in his massive trench coat the entire night. I say something like, "Oh, I'll go sleep over there." And he says, "Oh, is that where we're sleeping?" I say no and try my hardest to stay awake, so I'm not asleep near this guy. I eventually passed out on a single wooden chair sitting up. I have no idea where he slept. He wasn't meant to be staying with us, he just didn't leave. Next day, we're just hanging out and stuff, as a group. Play some Wii and some board games, pretty chill day. I realise pretty early on that he hasn't gone home yet and is still sitting there, in his trench coat still. Probably hasn't showered. He was remotely sociable, but very much how he is in the game. Very stern. That night we started drinking. Every single time I went to the bathroom, he was always right outside the door standing there waiting. I'd walk to wash my hands and he'd watch over my shoulder. Then follow me back to the table where everyone was. I tried not to be rude, but I really didn't want to ask what he was doing because that would prompt some weird, awkward convo. I was very lucky to get an invite to stay in one of the spare beds, where a few of the boys were staying. I figured that was enough people to take him off me if he tried to kill me in my sleep. So the next day, he's still there in his trench coat. Still hasn't showered. I spent the day trying to dodge him, but wasn't too successful. He'd made a habit of copying everything I do. I'd make a cup of tea. He'd make one too. I'd eat a hot dog. He'd eat one too. I'd put sauce on the hot dog. He'd put the same sauce on his. It was just eerie and a bit annoying. But I didn't want to ruin his time, so I didn't mention it to him. After all, it was merely an observation at that stage. He may have just really liked the sauce and really wanted a hot dog at the same time. I go to grab my stuff to hop in the shower around midday. He followed me and got a towel too. So I made up an excuse about how I felt sick all of a sudden. He offered for me to sit with him until I felt better. I said I wanted to lie down. He said we can do that too. I said, oh, I don't know, maybe I'll just stand up instead. Then I just ran into the toilet, pretending to throw up, and slammed the door behind me. I knew he was going to be outside the door, so I quickly fake-called myself while I sat in there by myself, using it as a smooth-out to be like, I really have to take this outside. He just stood there outside, staring at me from the door while I talked to myself on the front yard. After, I went to everyone else and just sat there for a few hours talking about shit. Finally, it gets to like 6 p.m. or something, and I just can't take it anymore, so I strongly suggest he goes home. He asked if I could go with him. I said no. So he asks if I can wait outside with him while he gets a cab. Sure, that way I get to actually go to see him physically leave in the cab. So I agree. A few people nearby instantly say, "Well, I'll go wait with you," since they too have noticed him lingering around me in an obsessive manner. Here's where it gets good. So we get outside. He snaps back and says, "I'd like some time alone with her, please." The boys look at me as if I'm about to get killed. I say, "Don't worry, it's okay, I'll be back in a few." And they just stand at the door and watch us walk away. Awkward silence for approximately 30 seconds. I ask if he had a good time. He says yes. You know, that crappy small talk. Then he opens his trench coat he's been wearing for like 3 days and hands me something. It was a little wooden thing, made of shitty wood. I ask what it is. He says, "It is a door. Have a closer look." It's a little wooden door, one side covered in duct tape, including the hinge, with a giant symbol of a letter of my first name in masking tape. He says I said I always wanted a door. Then I think back and remember a conversation about how I said I love really heavy vintage doors and French doors because they're so beautiful, and I'd love to have one as a feature in my house, etc. I guess I can see the sentiment. So I say thanks and just hold it awkwardly. Then he asks for a kiss. I said no. So he asks for a hug. I mistakenly said okay. It was the most awkward hug I'd ever done. Picture someone literally towering over you, and you're almost falling over because you're leaning away. The whole thing went on for maybe 10 to 15 seconds until I tried to escape, but realized he wasn't letting go. Then he bends down a bit more and says, "Did you feel my penis?" I said no, but instantly move away from him about a meter or so. He offers me to sit on his lap so I can feel it. I say no thanks. Then he asks if I want to see it. I say no thanks, and that I'm going back inside. By this stage, I'm kind of silently standing in the middle of everyone and say, "He gave me a door." Then show them the door and proceed to tell them what happened. I reenacted it for a work colleague with the actual door, who took said door and sticky taped it to the bottom of a bin saying it was unhealthy for me to keep it and demanded I threw it away. Kinda wish I kept it though. Deleted him when I got home and put him on ignore. Then left the guild a couple of weeks later because he'd always find me and sit there targeting me. Not even slightly adorable, but I'd just like to close that door in my life and nail it shut. Hey everyone, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 3 True Scary Stories, episode 109. Admittedly, I've never really played one of these guildy type games, but I've done quite a few stories where involving creepy people from them. All that being said, I guess all walks of life attract creepy people, awkward people, people that make tiny doors and try to whip out their penis. Ew. Although I do know what it's like to be part of a community. And yes, the community I've been part of did indeed have its weirdos. I remember, well, I'm sure most of you are familiar with the website OkCupid. I used to actually, have a profile on there. I think it's deleted now. Or it's inactive, I can't really remember. But I won't tell you what my name is on there, so you can go and try and find it. But they used to have chat rooms many, many years ago. And those who actually found the chat rooms, because they weren't really promoted, they were there, but not a lot of people knew about them, I guess. Those of us who found them, there was a group of us who got quite friendly through the chat. And this is one of those cases where online friends do feel quite genuine. And I guess that's more of a generational thing in some ways. certain people of an older generations perhaps don't understand, but yeah, online friendships can be quite important. And I got to know a number of people there. Got to care about them, some of them quite a bit. Got to dislike some of them quite a bit as well, to be honest with you, but by and large, the ones that you didn't like tended to just kind of drift in and out. They weren't there all the time. Anyway, this group of people, and eventually the OkCupid chat shut down, and we tended to gravitate to other websites here and there. And generally, as a group, one would find one site, or they knew someone who ran another site, so the word would go out, and eventually we'd end up congregating on these sites. But as all things happen, gradually over time, I lost contact with these people. I think we went from OkCupid to a website called My Profiles. It's not even around anymore. And then we even ended up on a couple of the naughtier websites just because they had decent chat functions. Well, like I say, over time things drifted apart, and I gradually lost contact with all of them, which is a little bit sad, but I suppose it was inevitable in a way. Well, okay. And with those words, I'm going to head off. Going to actually get to editing my next couple of videos, and I think, I'll start recording for the Q&A soon, I think. Probably this week or next week. Okay, so until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.